welcome to my presentation of the primary motor cortex, primary sensory cortex, and homunculi. And my name is Jordan Lujan. So first, this takes place in the cerebrum. These different sections are parts of the cerebrum. And before I go into those sections of the cortexes, we do have four lobes of the cerebrum: the temporal, occipital, frontal, and parietal. And you can see in the picture that they are all different colors. The frontal is red, um, the parietal is blue, the temporal is yellow, and the green is occipital. Now also pictured, you can see the cerebellum in the back of the brain and the brainstem under the brain. So the cerebrum is the part of the brain that involves thought and voluntary action and picks up sensory information. The cerebrum is very special in human physiology. And the reason that it is special in humans is because of the cerebral cortex, or the gray matter, the thin outer layer of the cerebrum. There are these intense folds that are in the human brain, compared to something such as a cat brain or a rat brain that has nowhere near as many folds as we do. This increases the surface area, which allows for much higher level action to occur. And also, the humans are special in that we have a very large cerebrum in compared to other animals. So now that we have that, and I will come back to the cerebral cortex later on, the thin layer, but for now let's move on to the primary motor cortex. And you can see in the image here, the primary motor cortex is the dark blue, and it is part of the frontal lobe. It's actually the furthest region of the frontal lobe as far as going backwards towards the next part of the brain, the parietal lobe. So the primary motor cortex controls muscle movement, it's motor, muscle. And oddly enough, in our brains, each half of the brain, so the left hemisphere would control the brain would control the right side of the body. So it's very interesting that it does that. And same with the other part of the brain. The right side of the brain would control the left side of the body. Left side of the brain controls the right side of the body. So now we have the primary sensory cortex, also known as the primary somatosensory cortex. And this is located in the parietal lobe. In the picture, it is the dark red, and the rest of the parietal lobe is the light red. The primary sensory cortex, as the name gives off, has to do with our senses: touch, spatial awareness, pain, temperature, things like that. And these two parts of the brain kind of work together to, for your body to function as it should, as far as the voluntary parts of your body should function. So going back to the cerebral cortex, just want to, look at this picture again, this outer layer, and talk about something kind of strange, known as the homunculi. So homunculi or homunculi, um, it's Latin for little human. And you can see the oddity of this picture. You can see the motor area is in blue, and it's on the left side of the picture. And um, basically, the homunculi is kind of like a little human as far as our brain sees our body. And it's been noted that the brain puts emphasis on some regions much more than other regions of the brain. And we can see that in the picture. The motor area, we have, larger picture of like the tongue, the face, the mouth, and all that stuff. The hands are very large. The trunk is not as large. The feet have a pretty good size. And also listed in the motor area, chewing, salivation, vocalization, lips, tongue swallowing, all these different things that have to do with the face. And the sensory area, you can see the face is still pretty large. The hands are fairly big, but you do have a slightly increased trunk and head area. The feet are there. The genitals are much more pronounced in the sensory area. A lot of senses go there. Things like that. Now, this would make sense that we have these areas are focused on more than others, perhaps. Uh, Most of what we do to survive involves our hands and our face as far as voluntary action goes. For involuntary action, of course, we have all of our organs in our body, and different parts of our brain control the involuntary actions. But as far as eating, we use our mouth. Tasting, smelling, seeing, all those things are very necessary for survival. And in addition to communication, there's a lot of verbal and nonverbal communication that all involve our face. Also, our hands are used for pretty close to everything we do. Writing, typing, climbing a tree, for example, in possible, Cro-Magnon humans or something. Uh, Eating, we still use our hands to pick things up. We use our hands for everything: hobbies, guitar, whatever you may do. Um, so it would make sense that there is such an emphasis as far as voluntary action on our hands and our face and head area, including also the feet, as the feet are not as pronounced as the hands and the facial area, but the feet are important too. We use those for movement. And just to see an artist rendition of how the mind somewhat perceives the human body based on its focus of the nerves, there is this picture of a homunculus. I mean, it looks a little bit ridiculous, but again, this is how the emphasis on our nerves are um, seen as by our body. And in this image, the genital region is covered up by a piece of clothing, but there is a good amount of sensory um, information coming from the genital area as far as our brain is concerned. Um, Now, how do we know that these parts of the brain do what they do? Well, this physiologist he was active during the early to mid 1800s, was, excuse me for mispronouncing his name perhaps, Marie Jean Pierre Florin. He was French, and he worked with pigeons mostly. He would cut open pigeons and remove different parts of their brains and do different tests like that. He noted that the cerebellum controlled coordination and things like that. The cerebrum was responsible for cognitive function. And he noticed if you remove the brainstem, the medulla, you cause death. So he said those must all be very important parts. He did a few other studies to kind of figure out different things, but we have refined things that he did in modern times. And in addition to that, there was many other cases that happened, both um, unethically, some ethically, some accidental, that show different things, such as the case of Phineas Gage, where he had a railroad piece go through his head, and he managed to survive, even though some of his brain was removed. And this it changed his attitude and behaviors and things like that. So there is some sort of cognitive function that goes with the cerebrum just based off that case study alone. So these parts of the brain, how they function, we didn't just kind of guess at them. It's taken, several years of figuring out how these work. And again, a lot of it was kind of unethical, a lot of it was accidental, but in modern times we have double tested most of these things, we have refined some of these things, and to this day we are making sure that all of these parts of the brains function as they are taught in textbooks. And here are my sources. Thank you for tuning in.